Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to the Health Show for a special live show looking at the coronavirus pandemic. With the recent outbreak of the disease that's become a pandemic around the world, we're bringing you this special programme to help you understand exactly what the coronavirus is and what you should do from a health perspective to avoid catching it or passing it on. We'll be welcoming health experts who will share their viewpoint and opinions on the matter too. Since it was first detected, the coronavirus, otherwise known as COVID-19, has been spreading fast in the last few months. As of today, more than 246,000 people are known to have been infected with the disease, and tragically, there have been over 10,000 deaths recorded worldwide, including 144 here in the UK. Sadly, the numbers are still rising, so it's crucial that we as a community and as a nation don't panic, but remain calm while taking all necessary precautions. The cause of the disease is suspected to have come from an animal market in China's Wuhan state. The virus can cause pneumonia-like symptoms like coughs, fever and breathing difficulties. In severe cases, there can also be organ failure. Recovery depends on the strength of the individual's immune system, and tragically many of those who have died have been the elderly who had been suffering with underlying health problems. In the UK, the medical advice from the NHS is that anyone in a household who develops a persistent cough or high temperature should stay at home for a minimum of 14 days, keeping away from other people. This applies to everyone, regardless of whether they have travelled abroad or not. Now, for more information, the best place to go is the dedicated coronavirus website, which is 111.nhs.uk/COVID-19, and you'll see that detail on the bottom of your screen, and we will give you that a lot more throughout the show. Now, if your condition worsens or your symptoms last longer than 7 days, then you should call NHS 111. Now, to talk through the various issues surrounding coronavirus, I'd like to welcome Dr. Imran Gohar, who is a general practitioner, and Sidra Naeem, who is a Muslim chaplain and Aalimah, who has also studied biotechnology. Well, first of all, thank you so much, both of you, for coming in. That's really great. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Lots to cover. But first of all, as the government begins daily briefings on the coronavirus, the Chief Medical Officer says that newly introduced social distancing methods will last a minimum of weeks and maybe even months. And we heard this from our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson.
This is a brand new disease. We need to learn as we go along, and that will be part of what we do.
It looks as though we're now approaching the fast growth part of the upward curve, and without drastic action, cases could double every 5 or 6 days. In a few days' time, by this coming weekend, it will be necessary to go further and to ensure that those with the most serious health conditions are largely shielded from social contact for around 12 weeks.
This is not a situation where a couple of weeks and this virus is on the way. Absolutely not. People should be thinking of a minimum of weeks to months, and depending how it goes, it may be longer.
Get the disease under control in the way that we're describing. If we can flatten that peak, and it starts eventually to decline and tails off across the world, then there's absolutely no reason why economies worldwide should not come roaring back.
So first of all, everyone watching will notice that we're observing this social distancing, keeping people apart from one another. But what I'd like to do, first of all, Doctor, if I may, is just get back to the real basics. Many people will have heard of it a lot, but I don't think it does any harm hearing it again. Sure. Tell us exactly what COVID-19, or whatever people might want to call it, but COVID-19 seems to be the term people are using mostly now. What exactly is it?
Well, as the name says, COVID-19, it's a sort of short for coronavirus, which was found in 2019. So it's kind of a virus. In a nutshell, you can say it's like a flu type of virus, which is spread by the respiratory droplets. and it basically stays in our throat or nasal passage, and it can go to our lungs as well, where it sits and cause problems. Basically, the reason why it's quite dangerous, as far as we know till now, is because we have little knowledge about it, and the rate of its transmission. It's been spread throughout the world in a very short period of time, and we know little about it as well. So that is one of the danger. We also know, as I said, a little about it, but we know for certainty that it is affecting the vulnerable people. For example, people with some long-term conditions, people who are elderly, definitely above 70. So there are certain things we know about it. Why there is more anxiety is because anything which is unknown and is spread with such in a so short period of time throughout the world will make people anxious, and the number of deaths we are seeing in a short period of time as well. The problem is that we know little, plus we don't know how to prevent ourselves. I mean, apart from washing hands and things, I mean, there is no vaccine for it, there is no treatment for it as such. So there is a lot of unknown, and anything which is unknown makes people more anxious, actually.
And indeed, judging from everything we've seen so far, there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of distress being caused for a lot of people. And if I can just come to you, Sidra, for a second, obviously being a faith channel, people turn to the Islam channel looking to see all aspects of different areas of life, and in this particular show of health and how it affects their faith. And within the Muslim community, obviously with mosques closing, it's had a huge impact, hasn't it?
Definitely, but very quickly at the same time, I think the Muslim community are adapting as well to the situation. So although 5 times prayers you get more reward reading in congregation in the mosque, people are making little congregations within their own family, so it's actually bringing families strongly together. So we've got, the father, for example, may be leading the prayers at home, and the whole family are behind him. Just 2 days ago, we had a sermon that was released about Friday prayers, Jummah, which is compulsory in Islam, but people said that you can actually pray that if there are 3 male people in the house, you can actually do a Jummah in your own house with a sermon and a call to prayer and everything. So I think that is at the same time relieving people a lot.
Now, there are some people who will have different ideas and different faiths and so on, and a lot of people will be coming up with all sorts of conclusions. Many people's faiths will be tested at this time, with some people even suggesting it's a punishment from God. How do you recommend that people actually keep their faith and keep it strong during this time?
I think that the way to explain it is, if it brings you closer to God and it brings you closer to the faith, then that is a good thing. And there has been so much good that has come out of this virus. Everybody's more united, everybody's looking after each other, we're all helping our parents all of a sudden, and the elderly. If it takes you away from God, any illnesses, then you can class it as a punishment according to Islam. We're also being tested as well.
And it's a really interesting aspect, hearing the positivity. It seems tough at this time to be talking about the positive things, but there are a lot of positive things that we're hearing about, of people helping each other in the community, making sure that people have supplies. And of course, we have a lot of technology to help us these days in terms of, with FaceTime, with all sorts of other applications to get that contact. But coming to some practicalities, Doctor, for a second, we hear about this self-isolation. Give us a bit more detail of what that actually means in practice, and especially for those, older members of our community.
So self-isolation is a hot topic right now, and we're getting loads of calls about it. So there are a few bits of self-isolation. For example, a patient who complains of cough, without any fever or any other symptoms of coronavirus, we advise them to self-isolate for 7 days. That's NHS guideline. If somebody who comes into contact with somebody who's known to have coronavirus but don't have a symptoms of coronavirus, for example, fever, cough and other bits, then they have to self-isolate for 14 days. If somebody who's a relative, who's elderly and they're looking after them, 14 days self-isolation also apply to them as well. People who are elderly, we are advising them to self-isolate in a particular place so that they don't have enough contact with outside, for example, people who are working, going in and out. And that also applies for 14 days as well. So yeah, self-isolation is right now divided into 3. I don't know how it's going to pan out in the future, but at the moment that's what we're advising.
And the reason for the self-isolation being up to 14 days is because it takes so long for this disease to manifest itself. I mean, that in itself is quite unusual, isn't it? The amount of time, the incubation time of this disease is unusually high.
Yeah, basically, it's a viral cycle, which is from 7 to 14 days for any virus anyway. But so that is why they're saying, as a precautionary measure, you should be off for that period of time. Yes, it's as I said, it's very infective. It's little known about this virus as well. So the whole point of self-isolating is that the people, even if you are healthy and you come into contact with that, you will have immunity against this virus hopefully. And once after 14 days, you will be immune to it as well.
And again, all of these questions are answered on that website, which we're putting on the bottom of your screens now. That is and should be the main source of information that people use, because one of the concerns going around at the moment is the amount of chatter on social media, which frankly a lot of it is really unhelpful, isn't it?
Absolutely, and especially people who are coming out and saying all sorts of things without any evidence. We believe on evidence-based medicine, whatever, and when you don't know about the viruses, how can you say for certainty? I think it is increasing the anxiety of people. There are certain food, I'm hearing a lot about that, whether it can cure it. There are certain things to do. So it's all speculative actually. People are just putting anything on the social media. There is no evidence behind it. And I think the way this disease is and how new it is, I think it will take a long time for us to understand it fully and come out with all these remedies and everything else.
And we're very fortunate here, aren't we, Sidra, in the UK? We have an amazing NHS health system here. We have probably some of the most respected doctors and medical teams in the world. This is nothing to do with politics. This is the finest medical teams in the world are working on this and giving us their advice, and they're the ones who are making sure the information on that website is up to date. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And they're also, if you think about it, all the medical professionals are putting their own lives at risk. That's the biggest one I think everybody needs to know about. Everybody else is all in isolation, but it's the medical professionals which are still out there working, pharmacists, doctors, nurses, all of them are putting their own lives at risk, and they're working out there for the betterment of the community.
And we should also take this opportunity to maybe put a few myths to bed as well, because there are quite a lot of myths out there. One of the ones is that people seem to think that the supply chain is going to run out and people aren't going to be able to get food and various things. We've seen some, frankly, ridiculous scenes in supermarkets and things like that. You're on the front line, you get to hear it all. My understanding is that the supply chain is absolutely fine, they just can't cope with people panic buying. But if people didn't do that, there's actually plenty for everyone.
I think as far as we are getting the news, we're getting news or emails almost every few hours actually from NHS and all the updates and things. Till now, I mean, there is no shortage of food or anything else like this. Now, as I said, this is something new. So everybody is coming into action now. How we going to cope with it? Medical side is one, but social is another. Lots of, in UK there's a huge number of elderly population. Loads of them live alone. So, so how we going to deal with their health issues. It's not just coronavirus. There are patients who are suffering from cancer. There are patients with other multiple health issues, patients with other, serious conditions who are at home and who need, kind of help from the medical profession, but they can't get out of the house now. So we are thinking about alternatives. We are doing a lot more phone consultations. But as Sidra mentioned, I think the challenge is to how you do a delivery of a safe, healthcare information and help. Because the frontline staff, let's say if doctors and nurses become victim of this virus, then who's going to deal with the problem? So it's quite challenging actually at this stage to provide a safe and effective healthcare system, to run a healthcare system, but we are all learning every day, and we are trying to do things which we never used to do before. And I think the government till now is quite encouraging people if we are making sure the delivery of the safe system. The other thing which is hopefully, I'm hoping will come into place is a antibody check for the people who may have coronavirus, and they are prioritizing it to the healthcare professional first so that they can be checked and see if they have immunity. There is a huge debate going on because healthcare professional faces all these cough cold on a daily basis. They may have immunity to it than the other population. And if, let's say, people who come back as positively immune to this virus, then there's a lot of things can be learned from them as well, and they can also work more effectively and openly in the community. So yeah, there's a lot of good things in the pipeline.
So a lot of positive things as well. What I'd like to do, we've only got about 6 or 7 minutes before we go to a break, and then we're going to be opening up the phone lines for you at home to give us a call and ask any of your questions. What I'd like to do is do some quick-fire questions, if that's okay, to help people understand some real basics of the coronavirus and what people should and shouldn't do. So the first one is, we've heard a little bit about paracetamol, we've heard about other kind of treatments. What's your view on somebody who's self-medicating? Maybe they've got a mild case. What about the talk about paracetamol?
I think the overusage of any medication it's not advisable right now. It's totally symptomatic. Treat it as any other flu. If you take paracetamol, there's nothing contraindicated as such, but take simple paracetamol, simple gargles, steam, rest, plenty of fluids, which we advise normally for other viral illnesses as well, like common cold and cough. At this stage, I think people are using a lot of ibuprofen and anti-inflammatory medication for no reason, but there is no evidence again to show that it is effective or is going to prevent it. So I think stick to the basic right now. Keep your hands washing, keep your hygiene when you're entering into the house, when you're going to any new place. Make sure you wash the surfaces if you're going to some market or whatever outside. I think it's a basic, simple, viral advice which we normally give, rather than specific. Because again, it's an unknown virus. The advice is just symptomatic, as for any other viruses. Do not trust on you eat ginger or you eat garlic. I'm hearing all those sorts of things. Yeah.
Are there any foods which have been found to help?
Well, there is no evidence about it.
Okay, so basically, let's wash that one to one side. Next thing is children, and Sidra, I know you have a lot of experience here with children. The word is that children, if they do get it, is very, very mild symptoms, but can they still be carriers and pass it on to other people?
Yes, definitely. It's an invisible virus, so even some people actually don't have any symptoms, but they can still pass on the virus to others as well. So this is why this is quite dangerous, and this is why they had to close down the mosques and things. It wasn't just easy enough just to tell the elderly to stay away, or people who have got pre-medical conditions to stay away, because it can be hidden inside you, the virus inside anybody, and then it can get passed on to others.
And in addition to this point, actually, it's kids have a good immunity normally, and they're quite resistant for these bugs. But the danger is they're going back home, where they may have elderly grandparents, they may have some siblings, parents who got some critical illnesses and stuff. So I think that's something which we need to be aware of, that yes, kids, although they may have a better immunity for themselves, but they can still transmit it to the others.
And I think that's particularly important in the Muslim community,
yes,
isn't it,
definitely.
where families are such, they're normally so strong together and so on. And so if children are living with their grandparents, then what's the advice there versus, obviously, if you don't live with elderly people, it's best to just stay away for the moment to allow them to self-isolate. But what about if they're living in the same house?
They need to be distanced. That's the first thing. 2 metres, isn't it, distance at the moment that the government has given. So the children need to stay 2 metres away, really. And they can wear face masks. But the thing with the face mask is very important. It's only if you've got the virus, then that will stop it spreading to others. But if others have got the virus, that can still come to you with the face mask on.
So there's a bit of a fallacy with the face mask.
Yes.
For protection, forget it. But if you actually have the virus, you're in a home or whatever, to stop or to hopefully ease the spread, then that can actually help.
Yes.
And again, there are a lot of people who do have to go about their daily tasks. They have to go shopping, they have to do their things, and some people, of course, are still working, not just health workers. A lot of people are still working. What advice would you give to them in terms of protecting themselves?
Wash their hands, and wherever they're going, make sure that everybody working on their colleagues, they don't have any symptoms of cough and flu type of things. Make sure they can wipe the surfaces and stuff where they can touch things. Make sure they wash their hands when they're moving from one room to the other. Minimize the exposure to anything which is coming externally. A point I just want to add about the children at home. Actually, one thing which is advised is if you have 70-plus grandparents or somebody living in your property, it's better if they self-isolate for 14 days, actually. How they can do it, basically, they can do it even in their room. Make sure the children who are certain schools are still open today, so they're coming back home. So make sure the grandparents have no direct contact for at least 14 days to be on the safe side.
And of course, there's lots of things, practical things people can do. You hear a lot of the various sort of local shops, and people are doing deliveries and things like that, where they can leave something outside. So it is, although it's not comfortable, it's not easy, it is possible to completely self-isolate, isn't it, where you literally don't have contact, and therefore you can really protect yourself.
I think what people need to understand is why it's important. You have to break the cycle. This virus has a cycle. And it's like, you put the matchbox in a line and it just ignites each other. I think you have to break the cycle. And the one way of breaking the cycle is that I don't transmit it to you. And then, obviously, if you don't have it, then you will not be able to transmit it to the other. So in that manner, it's not about catching the virus. The effect of viruses are the key. So let's say, if I transmit to you and you're high risk, then it can be fatal. So
Okay.
that's where you need to break the cycle, yeah.
Okay, and very, very quickly, Sidra, mental health is a massive issue here for a lot of people who are already suffering from mental health. This will only exacerbate it potentially. And just very, very quickly, could you give us maybe some tips on how we can deal with it mentally?
I think that we need to build up our immunity. One of the problems with this disease is that because it's a new disease, we have no immunity against it.
In the meantime, should you suffer from any medical problems or health concerns, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. Again, we've got lots more information for you, but in the meantime, as always, go to the coronavirus website for that key information. This is where you get the best information, and it's 111.nhs.uk/COVID-19. That's where you're going to get the accurate information about coronavirus. Remember, if you have any symptoms that worsen or symptoms lasting longer than 7 days, that's the point that you then call NHS 111. Fortunately, that is all we have time for. I'd like to thank our guests. Thank you very much indeed again for watching. We'll be back again next week. In the meantime, I really hope that you stay safe and you'll be taking all the necessary precautions to protect your health by heeding the advice of the National Health Service. Goodbye for now. Assalamu alaikum.